I call upon loud roaring and reveling Dionysus, primeval, double-natured, thrice-born Bacchic lord, wild, ineffable, secretive, two-horned and two-shaped, ivy-covered, bull-faced, warlike, howling, pure. You take raw flesh, you have feasts, wrapped in foliage, decked with grape clusters. Resourceful Euboleus, immortal god sired by Zeus when he mated with Persephone in unspeakable union. Hearken to my voice, O blessed one, and with your fair-girdled nymphs breathe on me in a perfect spirit of agape. Hello, I'm Courtney.
And I'm Brandon, and welcome to the Time Travelers Club. I want to say that was very impressive, Courtney, especially with after the debacle that we just had. Every time, just for the record, we know this is episode 1, brand new, and it wouldn't be us if this kind of thing didn't happen.
True.
Her daughters called, having a crisis of, appropriate proportions for them, humorous ones for us, and then as soon as we started to re-record, a text message came through, and it's like every time we hit play.
Every time we go to record, it's just like something, attention from something, but we digress.
Exactly. And you know what? I kind of love that because you know what? This just goes to prove that we will still push through for our people. So if you're listening to this, you're already getting a flavor of like what we do here. So today we are going to talk about the god Dionysus. A lot of people, I think, have an idea of what Dionysus is, god of wine and good times, right? But he's so much more than that. And I, when we started this podcast, we were talking about it. I really wanted to talk about topics that people think they know, but they really just don't, because we get these, broad strokes versions of history and mythology and stuff like that, like SparkNotes version, and it really does no justice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, a lot of people want to know more. So without further ado, let's talk about Dionysus. So, in ancient Greek religion and myth, Dionysus is the god of, yes, winemaking, orchards and fruit, vegetation, fertility, festivity, theater, insanity, ritual madness, religious ecstasy, freedom, liberation, and revolution. He was also known as Bacchus by the Greeks, not the Romans. That's a misconception. That was the Roman name. Mm-hmm. It's not. He was known by Bacchus by the Greeks, and that's just the name that the Romans happened to adopt when they adopted the Dionysus, right? Mm-hmm. But as we just heard from your prayer, Courtney, mm-hmm. he's a man of multi faces.
Yes.
So, he is both Dionysus and Zagreus and Bacchus. He's all of those things, depending on the context. So, this was the name that was for frenzy and was induced in this ritual called Bacchaea, as Dionysus, Eleutherius, the liberator, his wine, music, and ecstatic dance free his followers from self-conscious fear and care about the subvert and oppressive restraints of the powerful. His thyrsus, a fennel stem scepter, sometimes wound with ivy and dripping with honey. Yes, it's the exact euphemism.
Oh, it is absolutely euphemism.
We know this, okay? Dripping with honey. Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Is both beneficial wand and a weapon used to destroy those who oppose his cult and the freedoms he represents. He was also a god who was gender fluid. That's right, people.
Because
they've always existed.
Yeah, it's always been a thing.
Yeah.
Always.
You're welcome. He identified as male, so we will use, his key pronouns here. Mm-hmm. But, he is very gender fluid. He's very cool. He's very relaxed. He's very demure.
He is not necessarily a fully corporeal form. No. So how dare you assume that he always has a penis?
Right. I mean, to be fair, they can turn into whatever they want.
Exactly.
So
they're gods. Come on now.
They are the OGs of people who told people what their gender was.
I'm a dude today.
To be fair, he was a dude in a patriarchal world, so he had the choice. A lot of the female goddesses do not get that choice because we have to make sure we hold these both, whether you think they're fictional or not, the fact that they are incorporeal, right? Mm-hmm. We still have to hold them by the standards of patriarchy and the reality.
God, yes, we do.
Because God forbid. But he was a dude, so he had a penis, so therefore he got to choose whether he had that penis that day or not. So, but I digress. We're going to do a lot of that.
Always.
He was also a god who was gender fluid, as I said, and blurred the lines between masculinity and femininity. Now that does work in the real world for both. Mm-hmm. A lot. And not like the role switching stuff like you'll see with Saturnalia later, but this is literally like where women, what we would think, oh, like, well, they're just women having a good time and like, God, have autonomy over their bodies. What?
That is
or
seen
women
as like
guiding young men. Mm-hmm. That is in the Greek and Roman world, full role reversal. So like there is this blurring between what's masculine and what's feminine, not just in his representation, but how his followers even interact with him and the world. So I find that interesting. At times, he is depicted as an older bearded god, and still others as a feminine, long-haired youth.
Which is wonderful. He gets to change with the times. He gets to morph and almost be amorphous.
Yeah. I like to think that he's both the fun kind of like party uncle, like, and then at the same time, just that like hot guy at every frat party, you know? But not like the douchey frat. Like that's Apollo. This is like the hot, like the guy that like Apollo wishes he was. Which is like where
the
girls want to flirt with him.
Oh,
and he's just like, doesn't even realize he's flirting. Like what, that guy, that hot guy, who's kind of artsy. That guy.
Always.
Right. And he can handle his liquor.
Oh, God, I would.
Because not all those gods can.
So. No, they cannot.
So good for him.
All right. So his followers were outrageous and wild. They broke away from convention and inspired fear or envy by those who witnessed him. There were the satyrs. Male nature spirits, often depicted as half man, half goat. They were wild, boisterous, and in a state of perpetual sexual arousal, depicted with outrageously enormous phalluses.
Outrageous. I made her read that out loud.
It's a third leg.
But for real, look at the vase paintings. We will probably do an episode on Patreon at some point. We're setting up a Patreon.
Yes.
Where I talk a bit about art history, because that's my background. I'm an art historian, officially. On paper, I got the piece of paper to prove it.
Yay.
But, yeah, look at the vase paintings. They're great.
They're phenomenal. But lecherous as they were also fond of wine, drinking, and revelry as they played flutes, shook tambourines, and danced wildly. Now, that's the masculine following. That's the male. The Maenads were the female followers of Dionysus and the most significant members of his retinue. He had broken them from the shackles of their oppression in a patriarchal society, and they rejoiced. Agents of their own sexuality, which is a very that is a modern concept.
Right. We will not revisit this, people, until like the 1960s. Just keep that in mind.
That's wild.
Like in a way, like where this is acceptable. Granted, it wasn't really acceptable then, but also good luck telling these babes what they were going to do and what they weren't going to do.
Exactly. But agents of their own sexuality, and for the first time, truly free. Their hair wild and loose. They worshipped him through ecstatic song and dance, allowing his gifts to fully take hold and lead them where it may. Those who partake of his mysteries are believed to become possessed and empowered by the god himself.
Which is really interesting, right? Because like you think about like gods and goddesses and like this idea of possession, right? It's not uncommon, right?
Yeah.
But like, I think the closest you would ever see of a male god, quote unquote, possessing a female in the like real world would be Apollo with his oracle.
Yes.
And that's more of a speaking through rather than a full-on possession. But like typically you see it's like the female goddess with a female priestess, a male god with the male priest, so on and so forth. But here is a male allowing himself to be like
vocalized through a female.
And like I just think that's great. The other thing too is like you'll see like the maenads, like if you're reading like the scriptures in first-hand sources, they're not always painted flatteringly. It's like they're treated like, oh, these wild women with their loose hair. And you look crazy. Where have we heard this before, right? But we have to remember the lens that we're reading this is through patriarchy, especially Roman patriarchy, which really, really didn't like any of this, right? And the men that were writing about this were from that class, so we have to take a lot of what they say with a grain of salt. To me, the detail is that the satyrs are kind of projected as humorous, but the maenads retain their humanity, and I think that's telling. They're still human-esque, right? What the interpretation is that they're just humans. They're enthralled, and sometimes they're nymphs. But the point is that either way, they are depicted as human. They're just like us. But if you look at these face paintings, it's serious. They're dancing and shaking, and it's not humorous like the pans are, and it's not like threatening. It's just women dancing and having a good time, and you really don't see too much of that. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think that is where we really need to look, is the visual representation, not just what a bunch of old white dudes from Rome decided to tell us.
No, and it's true, because if we constantly are just looking at their perspective, we are going to see a very, very skewed point of view of the world.
Right. Imagine if every view you had on women today, say it's 200 years from now, and every view you had on women today only came from a certain demographic of far-right American political views. Okay? And that's essentially what we have here.
Yes.
And like we don't have anyone else's interpretation whatsoever.
Because everybody else was, unfortunately, discounted.
And everyone had a motive of why they would want to necessarily not empower these women.
True.
So his origins are uncertain, though, and his cults took many forms. Some are described by ancient sources as Thracian, others as Greek. In Orphism, he is variously a son of Zeus and Persephone, or the twice-born son of Zeus and the mortal Semele. I said that smelly, and I didn't mean to. It's Semele. My apologies.
It happens.
The Eleusinian mysteries identify him with Iccus, the son or husband of Demeter. Most accounts say he was born in Thrace, traveled abroad, and arrived in Greece as a foreigner. His attribute of foreignness as an arriving outsider god may be inherent and essential to his cults, as he is the god of epiphany, sometimes the god who comes. Yes, we are 12-year-olds.
I mean, like if we're looking at his staff with the honey drug, I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
And see, I do it to myself. I make myself read these things. So
this is your fault.
This is my fault. And yet, there is evidence that he may have been one of the oldest of the gods, whose worship predates the likes of Zeus and the other Olympians, and a remnant of a long-lost indigenous culture that had been thoroughly absorbed by the migrations in the murky beginnings of what we consider culturally ancient Greece. Because we have to remember, folks, Greece was not a monolith. And like, there's a reason they don't call the Minoans ancient Greeks.
Because they weren't.
And then the Mycenaeans were not the same as the Minoans, because culturally they were not. There's a lot that goes into this that we are not covering with, because we're keeping the scope within Dionysus. But just keep that in mind, that we don't even have an interpretation of a lot of like the Minoan language or Mycenaean language, let alone like records of like where these original concepts came from and how they evolved. So this is all conjecture. There is evidence for this, but
you have to figure.
I think it's perfect as the god of contradiction, that he's both old and young.
Oh, I love that.
He's both the oldest and first person there and a foreigner.
And that's so perfect, isn't it?
Isn't it? Right. It's just interesting. And I think that sometimes because there's an idea, I think, for me, I interpret it as he was so ancient that by the times the Greeks were retouching on him, he was unrecognizable and foreign to them.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, even though they were the foreigners in a way, because the Dorics and all these tribes, there's ideas that they migrated there and so on and so forth. But this concept that he was so ancient they couldn't even recognize him anymore, therefore he became foreign again. You see this in a lot of other cultures too.
You really do.
Like Welsh literally means foreigner, and they were the original Brits.
They were there.
The Anglo-Saxons who invaded called them Welsh, which meant foreigner. And you see this, the Romans did the same thing with the Brits.
Oh, absolutely.
I see a lot of this with the Brits. We do it with our own people here in America, the Native Americans, we call them that and stuff now.
Yeah.
But for a long time, we gave them a name like Indians, like they were foreigners.
They're like, no, they are of the land.
Them like they're foreigners within our own land.
It's ridiculous.
And so, but
you have to figure history is written by the victors. You have to see what lens you're viewing things through.
Correct. So I just want, but back to Dionysus.
Absolutely.
Back to Dionysus. So I just want to keep that in mind, that he is a god of contradiction. So when I say he's a new god, he's also the oldest.
Yes.
Keep up.
Keep up.
God, how hard is this to understand?
I know.
But one thing that he is, so anyway, and yet there is evidence that he may have been one of the oldest gods, which I just said, whose worship predated Zeus. Like I said, as a remnant of a long-lost indigenous culture, like I said. Dionysus continues to be paradoxical and just as mysterious to us today as he was back then. And yet, of all the gods, he continues to be perhaps the most relatable to us, because who doesn't love to party, dance, drink, and be free?
Well, I mean, like the fact that he is of revolution and all of these things, he is not only revolutionary, but evolutionary in my mind.
I think he's just a constant. Like, I do, like I said, just people have always wanted to party, let loose, and just have fun. And granted, that being said, there's always a party pooper.
I mean,
it is a tale as old as time.
It is.
And I think that's great. Honestly, I think that's great. And it's transcultural, too. You see this kind of character in all the different mythologies across the world.
You really do.
And, like, if you're in India, they like the party. You're in Japan, who loves a good festival and the party. And there's always going to be some high, noble person who
looking
doesn't
down
like
their
the
nose.
racket.
Yep.
Right?
Oh, absolutely.
And so I do love that this is a universal concept, and it transcends not just space, but time.
It really is. So today we are going to focus on the myths and stories surrounding him. In future episodes, we will discuss the historical and cultural significance in the real world, but for the sake of cohesion and straight up giving the detail this topic deserves, we figured we would break it down for you guys.
All right. So let's start with some of those symbols we talked about that are associated with Dionysus. The earliest cult images of Dionysus show a mature female. I sound good. See, this is how you can tell we're new. Shows a mature male, bearded and robed. He holds a fennel staff tipped with a pine cone and is known as a thyrsus, like I had described at the beginning. Later images show him as a beardless, sensuous, naked or half-naked androgynous youth. The literature describes him as womanly or man-womanish, whatever that means. In its fully developed form, his central cult imagery shows his triumphant, disorderly arrival or return, as if from some far beyond place, beyond the borders of the known and civilized. His procession is made up of wild female followers, the Maenads, and the bearded satyrs with their raging, erect
raging boners.
Big old boners. But I like hearing in the story that they're not like taking advantage of those Maenads.
No, they're not.
Because Dionysus is not the god of date rape.
No.
Granted, there's some problematic mythology I saw once in a while where they tried to do that, but those are much, much later. And honestly, I think they do more to discredit him rather than like...
I think that's more of like fan fiction than it is. Yeah.
Because most of the original stories, as we're going to get into, that is not the case. He is the god of consent. And I love it.
We love the god
of consent. We love that. And respecting ladies and being like, hey, you don't need that man. Why settle for a man when you could have a god? but only if you're cool with it.
Only if you're good
And
with
that's
it.
what I love.
Yes, please.
Like, on the one hand, you could be like, oh, that's arrogant, and you think I'm going to like you because you're a god. And he's like, man, girl, you crying over the wrong stuff. I think you're cool. And
Exactly.
I'm getting ahead of myself. We're not going to do that.
You're good.
So, the god himself is drawn in a chariot, usually by exotic beasts, such as lions, or tigers, or bears. Oh my. Just kidding. And is sometimes attended by a bearded, drunken Silenus, who is not a satyr.
No.
He is not a satyr. He is usually depicted as like either like a big, chubby, fat guy who's half asleep, or sometimes he has like the characteristics of like a donkey.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it depends. Sometimes he's either half asleep on a donkey, or he himself is half donkey.
It's all I can think of is like the original Fantasia, where they depicted Dionysus as him. Though that's the part that always
that's
it was problematic.
That's that Roman propaganda a little bit.
Yep,
that's
absolutely.
like it trickles through, and you know, of course, it's game of telephone. But
True.
Dionysus is represented by city religions as the protector of those who do not belong, and I really love that, to conventional society, and thus he symbolizes the chaotic, dangerous, and unexpected, everything which escapes human reason and can only be attributed to unforeseeable action of the gods.
Kind of sounds like Jesus, doesn't it?
No, they're going to make some people mad. This is episode 1. We can't do that. But yes, I would agree, and we'll talk about that a little later in some of these episodes. There is some, like, you know, talk about, like, it is a funny coincidence, and I don't think it's unreasonable to think that. We have to remember that the cultures that took Christianity into its fold later had to make it approachable to their own people.
Yes.
And if there were correlations to the stories, they would have easily made those correlations, right?
Absolutely.
So, like, it's not, you know, so again, I'm not saying that Dionysus is Jesus or that Jesus is Dionysus, but there are similarities with the stories.
Absolutely.
So, and that's okay. That's okay. So Dionysus, here we go, was a god of resurrection. As if on cue.
Always.
And he was strongly linked to the bull. So a little different. I didn't see Jesus riding bulls.
No, but Jesus was associated with the lamb, which, if we're looking in astrology, is just one symbol beforehand. True. But I digress.
In a cult hymn from Olympia, a festival for Hera, Dionysus is invited to come as a bull, with bull foot raging. Walter Burkert relates, quite frequently is portrayed with bull horns, and in Kizikos he has a tauromorphic image and is referred to as an archaic myth in which Dionysus is slaughtered as a bull calf and impiously eaten by the Titans. Now, I do want to kind of take a moment to like lean into this. To me, speaks a lot to Cretan cults, and this to me gives kind of some credence to the idea that he may be a much older god.
Yes.
You know, like it just seems a bit of a coinky-dink coincidence. But the snake and phallus were also his symbols in ancient Greece and of Bacchus in the Greek and later Greek and Rome traditions. There is a procession called the Phallophoria. This is still going on today, folks. Just want to give you a heads up. You can go see this. In which villagers would parade through the streets carrying phallic images and pulling phallic representations on carts. Yes, it's a penis parade!
No, the thing is, I have seen this the world over. This happens just about everywhere. So the fact that, like, Dionysus.
I just think it's great. And, you know, the thing is like, I feel like, yes, in a lot of European cultures, especially older, like, established ones, it's not, like, it doesn't, like, really raise any eyebrows. It's like, oh, what a fun little folk thing that everyone's doing. Here, could you imagine just going down the streets of your, your local hometown, and there's just a dick parade happening? With no political agenda at all. It's just what people do. Yeah. That's it. No one cares where it came from.
It's not sexualized. That's the difference.
It's just fun. And, like, imagine little kids wearing dick hats. I'm not even kidding. It adds a whole new definition to dickhead. Everyone's carrying little staffs with little teens at the end, like the Thyrsus. So I just want to let you know this is a big parade that's still going on. And if you ever go to Greece, not ancient Greece, you're going to ancient Greece with us.
I mean, we're the time travelers club for a reason.
But you don't necessarily need to time travel with us to go still see that today. Go do it. It sounds fun.
We will have to schedule this.
Yes. And if you do it before we do, please send us pictures. I would love to see the penis parade.
I want to see the penis parade.
So, Dionysus is also closely associated with the transition between summer and autumn. In the Mediterranean summer, marked by the rising of the dog star Sirius, the weather becomes extremely hot, but it is also a time where the promise of the coming harvest grows. Late summer, when Orion is at the center of the sky, was the time of the grape harvest in ancient Greece. Plato describes the gifts of this season as fruit that is harvested, as well as Dionysian joy. Pindar describes the pure light of high summer as closely associated with Dionysus and possibly even an embodiment of the god himself. An image of Dionysus' birth from Zeus, We'll get to that later. Thai calls him the light of Zeus, Dios Phos, and associates him with the light of Sirius.
Yes, we love the dog star. All right. So various different accounts and traditions existed in the ancient world regarding the parentage, birth, and life of Dionysus on Earth. Complicated by his several rebirths, by the 1st century BC, some mythographers had attempted to harmonize the various accounts of Dionysus' birth into a single narrative involving not only multiple births, but 2 or 3 distinct manifestations of the god on Earth throughout history in different lifetimes. So, keeping this story straight, unfortunately, prepare to zig and zag.
Mm-hmm.
The historian Diodorus said that according to some writers of myths, there were 2 gods named Dionysus, an older one who is the son of Zeus and Persephone, but that the younger one also inherited the deeds of the older. And so the men of later times, being unaware of the truth and being deceived because of the identity of their names, thought that there had been but one Dionysus. He also said that Dionysus was thought to have 2 forms. The ancient one having a long beard, because all men in early times wore long beards, and the younger ones being long-haired, youthful, and effeminate, and young.
So I also want to just take a second to after that, you'll see how he kind of does 2 things here. One, he goes, oh, these people were just mistaken. Second, that there were 2 of them, blah, blah, blah. My thought is this. It's almost like we're retroactively trying to go back and unite everybody under the same umbrella of religion, right? Because we have to remember Diodorus comes much, 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 much later, right? So you have to remember when all these different religions came up, right? It's not like today where we have nationalism, this idea of nation. You may have a similar culture, but even then, you might not even understand each other's dialect. Just for example, the Dorics versus the Ionians were major differences in language, let alone how each individual area, which did not necessarily communicate with each other that often, would have developed their own religions. Yes, we get this idea that there's these trading of ideas and adoption of new ideas from different peoples, but then it's they're also still isolated, and any little scraps they get, they may add to that story and then develop it. So then by the time you get to Rome and places like that, when you're in full, or even the the Macedonian Empire, Hellenistic Empire later, right? When there's a more centralized government that wants everybody to be unified for the clear, obvious reasons.
Yes.
Then it's going back and okay, we all have to agree on the same idea. You see this with Christianity too. Later, they do the same thing. Early Christianity, monks didn't even agree on how they should cut their hair.
No.
That was a big thing in England. It's a whole story for another day.
Oh, gosh, yes.
But
we will go on
the Irish,
tangent.
One was an extreme mullet, and the other's the one that we all think of, right? When we think of monks, right? It was really, both were hideous. And and it was considered heresy. If whoever lost this case, we're heretics now. I think that's why. Over here, heretics.
Heretics.
Anyway, but so this is kind of that going on, right? So for the sake of it just making sense, today we are discussing the more mainstream of the mythologies, and maybe saving some of the others for later episodes, as they will make more sense when we talk about the many mystery cults he would become associated with. So yes, we know he's a part of the Orphic one, the Dionysian mysteries, the Elysian mysteries. Those are not going to be a part of this mainstream one. This is going to be just the more mainstream ones that focus on him, particularly, that they all seem to agree on.
Agreed. So, to the common tradition, Dionysus was a son of Zeus and Semele, the daughter of Cadmus of Thebes. Zeus fell in love with Semele and slept with her, promising her anything she wanted and keeping it all from Hera. But Semele was deceived by Hera into asking Zeus to come to her as he came to Hera during their courtship.
Hera always knows.
Oh, Hera
why does he even try?
She's a goddess.
I know, it's like, but like Hera won't find out. She always finds out, Zeus.
She's a goddess,
the only reason I feel bad is because this may be the one time he had a consensual relationship with someone. Which is wild for Zeus. For Sky Daddy Zeus.
I mean, seriously,
so
that is
kind
wild.
Of fucked. And of course, it's the woman who's going to be punished here, but go on.
I mean, patriarchy.
Spoiler alert.
Patriarch. So Zeus, unable to refuse, arrived in her bridal chamber in a chariot with lightning flashes and thunder and sent a thunderbolt at her. Semele died of fright, and Zeus grabbed her from the fire as her 6-month aborted baby, which he sewed into his thigh, Greeks being polite for the testiculars.
Yes, so that's a fun little fact. Thigh translates the same as scrotum, people. So when gentlemen scholars later were distributing these tales in the 19th century, they didn't want to say that Daddy Zeus was carrying a baby in his nutsack, so they decided the thigh was more polite.
I mean, it's polite, I guess.
Correct.
Kind of. So after Semele's death, the remaining daughters of Cadmus circulated the story that she had slept with a mortal, therefore accusing Zeus. Apologies. And because of this, had been killed by a thunderbolt. At the proper time, Zeus loosened the stitches and gave birth to Dionysus. Way to take credit, dude.
Yeah.
Whom he entrusted to Hermes. From there, Hermes took him to be raised by his aunt and uncle, Ino and Athamas, persuading them to bring him up as a girl.
Gender fluid.
Always. Once she realized her plans had failed, in her rage, Hera inflicted madness on them, where they would try to kill the infant god.
Aww.
However, Zeus managed to save him by changing Dionysus into a baby goat, escaping the wrath of the great goddess.
What a cute little kid.
Literally. A kid.
I just like, someone needs to see, I don't know why my brain went this way. A little Pokemon, like a baby goat Dionysus. Someone make it for me. Thank you.
Please, I need it.
That's so cute. Oh.
So Hermes took him to the nymphae of Asian Nicaea, whom Zeus in later times places among the stars and named the Hyades. Or is it Hyades?
Hyades, I think.
Hyades.
Hyades. I think you'd be fine either way. So fun fact,
guys, I'm not fluent.
We're not Greek, and we don't speak ancient Greek either.
No.
So we are trying our best.
We're doing what we can with what we got.
But I think you did a good job.
Oh, thanks. So, long story short, all these poor people get to pay for the actions of
Sky
Zeus.
Daddy.
Yay, Sky Daddy.
So Sky Daddy cheats on his wife, and so the mistress gets to pay for it. Mm-hmm. The sisters of the mistress get to pay for it.
Yep.
The hero dad gets to pay for it. Poor little baby Dionysus gets to pay for it.
All of them.
My God, all this, any towns, and it's most of these people had nothing to do with it. You could argue Semele made the consensual choice to be with this guy, but everyone else in this story, you're mad at them for what? Oh, I'm not supposed to take in my nephew and help them? I'm so sorry.
Exactly.
Or the town who probably doesn't even know this kid's even here gets to pay for it? That's cool.
Yeah, no.
So
no, it's not right. And honestly, yes, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, but Hera goes way too far in the myths.
But we have to remember that Hera, this is also still filtered, right?
Yes.
We do not know the oral traditions of Hera.
Yes.
If we went back in time and we went to a temple, right, to Hera, right? Maybe not the big ones, but like decent sized ones, right?
Yeah.
Where you had the female priestesses. I have a feeling they would have different stories. Ones that were specifically chosen not to be written down by men.
Yes.
Or if they weren't held on to, unfortunately. So we get, unfortunately, women, goddesses being used as tools for patriarchy. So, but I like to think that the Queen of Heavens would not stoop so low.
No, and like...
I think she would...
No.
No.
Like, if I'm being honest, the way that Hera is described is always like this bitter bitch.
Mm-hmm.
That makes no fucking sense. She's the Queen of Heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Why would she be bitter?
So if you guys have never heard of this before, get out of the rock that you're under. It's called Lore Olympus, right?
Oh my God, yes.
It's a webtoon, right? And there's the author's amazing. She's pulling from so many ancient myths. Ones that only nerds like me know. And I'm like, oh my God, she knew this. I love this. But the one thing I love is her interpretation of Hera, where it doesn't necessarily stray too far away from the mainstream narrative to like not be recognizable, but she doesn't make her a bitter bitch. And I love that. Like, even with the Semele myth, she's not like smiting all these women. No. She's not holding, other than maybe the consensual, like there's some nymphs and stuff there in there that she kind of was like, really? Yeah. Really? But like, again, those relationships you can see are consensual, and they think they're making Hera a joke. And honestly, then you're like rooting for her at that point. Oh, but she's not going after poor mortal women who are being raped by Zeus and punishing them. And I loved that she didn't do that. And like, she's queen of the gods. She's being like taken advantage of and taken for granted. And she's not happy about it. And that, I think, is a more human story. And honestly, probably what the real story was. Yeah. And then we're not getting that part of it. So,
well, of course we're not getting that part of it. And like, I will, like, I love like Mesopotamian, Sumerian, that kind of mythology and things like that. We will get into that later. We will get into that later. But I am going to make like a tiny little thing here. The Queen of Heaven from that is Inanna or Ishtar. Why would they be a bitter bitch? No. They literally have the world at their feet.
And the thing is like Zeus fears Hera at times. And I feel like it's later iterations where he's able to like punish her and do these things. But you notice that if he does punish her, it never lasts long. And to me, it just tells like the older stories have them far more equal. And if you look at like Minoan culture, if there was not more matriarch, like more feminine, like free will, it may have even been more matriarchal.
Yes.
Which, if that's the case, that would have been very foreign to the later Greeks.
Oh, no.
Right? And which just shows how different their cultures were. Mycenaeans were not as cool with women. Minoans were, though. There's a lot of evidence that had autonomy, where women inherited power, were the seat of power, where honestly, a lot of the cult images we see coming out of Minoan Greece are of goddesses, not gods. Goddesses. So like it's the mother goddesses that were more highly revered. Yeah. And you can kind of see notes of that in the later Greek myths, like with Gaia and things like that. Granted, you can tell that they're washing a little bit because they make sure to also take advantage of these poor women and ruin them, or like where a man took away where men took away their power. You'll see that one a lot. Like Gaia was super powerful, and then she created Uranus and he took all of her power away. Rhea was super powerful, and then Kronos came and took away all her power. And that is, I feel, on purpose. And you'll see there's a lot
over and over again all throughout history. Even
like in real world, Olympia, right? Yeah. Where they had the original Olympics.
Yeah.
That there's a lot of evidence that showed that was actually before there was Zeus being the main daddy there. There was actually a mother goddess that was more important. And then slowly but surely, the call of Zeus took over until straight up erased and like made women out to be bad in that area where women weren't allowed there and things like that. And it's like, wow, it took couple hundred years to do it, but they 180'd this, where this was a place for women and of powerful women, and then it was erased.
Absolutely.
So and it's like they conquered the female goddess. And I think that you see that a lot with later male patriarchal cultures, like in Greece and Rome and things like that, where they do this. They go into these areas and they erase people. And if they don't, like one of the last ones to really withstand that was like the Artemis of Ephesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was only Christianity that finally brought her down. But otherwise, yeah.
Well, even like in early Christianity, there was a mother goddess in there. I will like fully tiny little asterisk.
It's like the Virgin of Mary.
And no, it's not Mary.
Oh, it's no.
The Christian God had a wife. She was completely erased from the Bible.
Oh.
But yeah, like that is like an asterisk.
I was going to say, we'll have to deep dive on that one day.
Oh, absolutely.
I feel like I vaguely have heard things like that, whether it's like pseudo history or not. Like, and I'm not saying that you're speaking pseudo history.
Oh no,
here.
I got you, babe.
It's just more like I would want to see like what the official verdict was. Was it like a Dead Sea Scroll thing that like people like?
I believe her name was Asherah.
Because honestly, at the end of the day, if someone believed these stories enough to write them down, then to me that is proof enough that it was some sort of religion, right?
Yep.
You'll see, well, that's not the official religion, therefore it's not real. Okay, and so
all of these cults
here's
had
me
like
coming out and saying it, guys. All of this is hearsay, and I'm trying to be nice by not saying the things people believe are make believe. But like at the same time, you can, and people have done this, made up new things that they think are real in these things, and it pissed other people off, and it causes wars. Okay. So my point is that you can say whatever you want and believe whatever you want. It doesn't make it real or less real.
Exactly.
So,
boom.
But we have gotten way from poor baby cute goat Dionysus.
Oh, my baby Dionysus. All right. And we're returning. And the fact that you brought us back, my goodness.
I know.
All right. So when Dionysus grew up, because we went through where he was born, all of that.
Just quick aside, 2 seconds.
Yes.
He's one of the only gods that actually like grows up.
I know, right?
Because like even Apollo and Artemis are born as babies, but babies who literally like think of that like frog from WB, like hello my baby, hello my darling. Like hello, literally they talk about them like that, where they stroll out and start talking right there and then.
Yep.
Dionysus does not do that. He goes through other than his weird daddy ballsack birth, like is relatively normal kid. Like he's like he's a baby when like I know and like Cadmus had him. Yep. Like he was a baby, and then he grows up. Like he takes a human lifespan time to become an adult, not like 3 days or was fully formed. Like just I think that's fascinating.
It is because
and he's also
like I said, evolution, not only revolution, but evolution.
And he's also the only god that's not a demigod or whatever, or a god or a human that became a god, right? Who had a mortal parent who was a fully formed god.
Yes.
Which I find very interesting.
Isn't it?
Because like Zeus like did this a lot, and you had like Hercules. Yeah, he becomes deified later, only after he died.
Heracles, yeah.
Only after he died.
After he died, but after he like murdered
he lived
everybody.
A mortal life.
Yes.
Whereas Dionysus was already kind of a god, but also lived a normal childhood, sort of. I mean, normal in the sense that he grew up normal, right?
Yeah.
Like a normal pace.
Yeah.
So, like, I just find that interesting that he, of all the people that had mortal parents, was already a god from day one.
I know.
And I think that's fascinating.
It is.
I wonder where that came from. But anyway, so go back.
We go on. Okay. So when Dionysus grew up, he discovered the culture of the vine and the mode of extracting its precious juice, being the first to do so. But Hera struck him with madness and drove him forth a wanderer through various parts of the earth. Thankfully, and perhaps conveniently, and okay. You're gonna have to pronounce that for me.
That's okay. Phrygia.
Okay. Phrygia.
In Phrygia, the goddess
Cybele, better known to the Greeks as Rhea, cured him and taught him her religious rites, and he set out on a progress through Asia, teaching people the cultivation of the vine.
So that's interesting too. So Cybele, right, is later sometimes interpreted as Rhea. My thought's kind of like the Rome situation, though, where Cybele was her own thing, and they had their own thoughts about Rhea, and then they kind of incorporated her as being the same thing. Yeah. But it could be another case that I was talking about, where you have Cybele. Let's be clear, she was the goddess of wilderness, and of nature, kind of like Artemis was, but not having to be a virgin and everything. She could do who she wanted, whenever she wanted.
Yes.
And she was powerful, and the gods were not supposed to fuck with her. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
That was a thing. And, you know, it was one of those things that she's from Anatolia, right? So if you're wondering where Phrygia is, it's more like think where Turkey is today. So it's going to be up in there. And when you start looking at those cultures, you see like that's where Artemis of Ephesus is. That's where supposedly the Amazons came from, right? Which Amazons may be real. Fun fact, folks.
Oh, absolutely.
But they were just not in the mythological sense, but like they were real people, and just Greeks misunderstood it.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it was, again, a culture where women were held as equal as men. And they were like, well, someone's got to be in charge, so it's got to be the women, right? Because why would the men treat them with any respect unless they were told to?
Exactly.
Anyway, my point is just that, so Cybele is this great example of because when we think of Rhea, unfortunately, we think of a victim, right?
Yes.
So this is a great example of a goddess who is super powerful.
In her own right.
Right, in her own right, who lost all of that because of a man.
Yep.
And the Romans in particular, who really were into Saturn, aka Kronos, would be really into this idea, right?
Yep. Because the subjugation of the feminine has always been the game plan.
Correct. Also, just another side note, if Cybele is in fact the mother of Zeus and stuff, I just find that interesting too. And Hera, I find that interesting that she's more willing to help out her grandson. You know?
Oh, absolutely.
And it's kind of like a big middle finger to her daughter there.
I mean, the thing is...
Also, Hera won't fuck with Cybele.
No, absolutely not.
But screw with Mountain Lion Mama.
But think about it. Grandma, if we're thinking of Cybele as grandma, she's coming to fix the mistakes that her children made.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And
I love that. I love that story.
Know, right?
As a kid who was raised by his grandmother because of dysfunctional parents, I love this idea. I'm not saying I'm Dionysus, but Dionysus and I are never in the same room, just saying.
Okay, let's continue. The most famous part of his wanderings is his expedition to India, which is said to have lasted several years. According to the legend, when Alexander the Great reached the city of Nicaea near the Indus River, the locals said that their city was founded by Dionysus in the distant past, and their city was dedicated to the god Dionysus. These travels took something of the form of military conquests, according to Diodorus. I know I say that differently than you. He conquered the whole world except for Britain and Ethiopia.
Right. It's okay, guys. It's propaganda. It's okay. You know, right? So little fun fact, I was looking at Nicaea. I'm like, I wonder where the city is, you know, because there was a Greek colony in this area, right? And that's a whole different rabbit hole we're not going into. But I was just wondering, what does this place look like? Because I'm always just going down those rabbit holes so that you don't have to. And I could not find it. It is kind of like there's a lot of places that call themselves Nicaea later. Not anywhere near India, weirdly enough. But it's this Nicaea that he's referring to is considered sort of semi-mythological. Also, the idea that they already were worshiping Greek gods before the Greeks even got there, in the way that a Greek would even understand, to me seems a little I'm not saying they wouldn't know. They would, because there was contact, far more contact than we'd like to give credit for.
Oh, absolutely.
None of these people were in a bubble.
No.
But at the same time, I think this was just more like Greek propaganda of see, this is why we are allowed to be here and conquer here, because culturally we're always been here. And that's probably not true.
Oh, definitely not true.
On that note, something interesting to note about all these travels is just how many places he touches upon and incorporates into the early part of his story. On the one hand, I feel like we could write this off as being part of Hellenization, like I just talked about, and this all came from later where the Greeks were trying to explain their right to have these lands and so on and so forth. Like the skeptic in me, just really feels like it's convenient that these areas he conquered would later be a part of the Hellenistic Empire and exclude the only areas outside of their control. Ethiopia just meant every part of Africa other than the parts that they had named, guys.
Yep.
So Ethiopia is not the Ethiopia we're thinking of. That was part of what Greeks called Ethiopia. But pretty much anywhere that the Greeks didn't have a name for yet,
there was Ethiopia.
So you had Egypt, you had Nubia, you had like some other kingdoms that I don't have the names for right off the top of my head, but like, what we would call Libya and Morocco and stuff today, right?
Mhm.
So imagine you were like, okay, there's Egypt, Morocco, Sudan, and then the rest of it we're just going to call Africa. It's Africa. It's right. It's because we don't know what else is out there, so we're going to call this Africa.
Yeah. One, it's the self-aggrandizing, because if I didn't name it, it didn't exist.
Right. Because they had their own names, guys, and there was all cultures and stuff, of course. But, because they didn't know about, they're like, and the rest of this is Africa, I guess. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Ethiopia, that's what we'll call it.
Yay.
So when you see like an Ethiopian king, don't think that Ethiopia. Because honestly, that was just a term they used for Africa. Africa as a word itself is actually Latin. The ancient Greeks would have called the continent of quote unquote of Africa Ethiopia. So when you hear of Andromeda and she comes from Ethiopia, they could have just
somewhere in Africa,
right? Which could have just been the North Coast, which would have been more Mediterranean. I'm not saying that she was, because there's sensitivities with some of this sometimes, but. Do I think she was a fair-haired blonde lady if this mythological person existed? Listen to me. No. But she could have been purple. That's not the point. The point is just that you get people on both sides who are upset when Andromeda is depicted as like, I had this actually in my college class, some guy, and if you're picturing a certain guy, it's probably the right picture.
That guy. Okay.
But like, yeah, he was like, oh, they interpreted her with like dreads and stuff, and this is ancient Greece. I'm like, first of all, why do you think ancient Greeks were blonde, blue-eyed people? They weren't.
No, they weren't.
Second of all, gingers were vampires in their culture. Just a fun fact. Second of all, so yes, I'm a vampire. You're welcome. All I'm the immortal vampire god Dionysus. Second of all, like on the other hand, she could have just as easily been what we might consider more like Middle Eastern in complexion. Mm-hmm. She could have been like honey skin. Like Cleopatra suffers the same thing, guys. Mm-hmm. The point is that Cleopatra was real though, so it's a little bit more problematic and a little bit. I understand people wanting to identify and like pin something to her. Andromeda was mythological, guys. Again, it's like the mermaid thing with the Little Mermaid. People getting upset that she was being depicted by a black girl, and I'm like, she could have been blue. Mermaids aren't real, guys. Why are
not
we
in
mad?
That way.
Why are we not mad? Like, just relax.
Stop it.
Relax. So, with that being said, I like to be a little bit more. I am also, while I'm a skeptic and a realist, I'm also romantically an optimist. I'm also like Dionysus, a guy of contradiction. Not saying that we're the same person. About this, and this was a way for those areas to maybe feel like they were a part of a grander empire by adopting the particular god. Like maybe there was just some kind of universal truth and likability about this guy. He's a party god. If you're being conquered by a peoples, right? Mm-hmm. What's more relatable than this? Of all these gods that they have, this guy who represents foreignness, right? Mm-hmm. He may even look a little like you because he's sporting something from your area. Yep. And it's easy to make him look like your area because it's acceptable by the Greeks.
Absolutely.
As the foreign god. So if he's wearing your area's clothing, they wouldn't bat an eye. Mm-hmm. Versus if you put Zeus in those clothes, they may be more problematic. You see yourself in this person. He is a god that represents you in this empire. So like I said, it could be category A, could be category B. I think it's somewhere in between. It's
Agreed.
both. You were conquered and you were trying to find someone who looked like you.
Yes.
I also kind of wanted to take a minute to recognize how different the Greeks and Romans would have had viewed the same god. If we go with the Hellenization theory, what a way to try and incorporate people. Then have the origin myths of one of their gods be that of revelry and good times and fun. And the Hellenistic Empire was not nearly as rich as the Roman Empire would be at the end of the day. It was more of an expansion of Hellenization culture that already taken over the Greek world, where you had a bunch of city-states with a common culture, but would not have recognized themselves as a unified nation. So with that being said, when you're only tied by a single culture, this sort of idea works, right? But with the Roman perspective, Dionysus was kind of scary because he was a god of rebellion and liberation. And let's face it, Romans were kind of nerds, yeah? Like, they were kind of like party poopers. They just were fun.
They were
If they were fun,
stuck up.
yes, and if they were fun and party gods, think about the emperors that associate with Dionysus.
Caligula.
They're not Caligula, Nero especially. Hadrian, but Hadrian was one of the good ones.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the ones who are cool with Dionysus and are being reported as cool with him are also being reported as being horrible. So we have to remember demonized. So if you're demonizing an emperor and he just happens to be really cool with this god, what is that saying about the guy he worships, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we have to remember that. And again, a god that represents all the foreignness. When you want to really celebrate your dominant culture, there's not a place for that. And it's a god that celebrates liberation and revolution from an empire.
No, you're trying to unify everything, and this is exactly opposite of what you want.
Correct. So, and that goes, we're not even talking about women feeling anything.
Oh,
and
God.
This is the god of women being having autonomy.
They weren't allowed out of the house. What are you talking about? They can choose who they fuck.
Yeah. So, but above all else, Rome demanded order. That's the big thing for them, is order.
Oh, absolutely.
So a god that is literally the antithesis of this would have been problematic.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm getting ahead of myself a bit, and I'd rather talk about this in depth later. So I'm going to get back on track, and I'm going to give this back to you. So let's talk about another myth about Dionysus.
All right. So after all this traveling and going about partying it up and conquering people who wouldn't accept him until they did, Dionysus ends up returning in triumph to Greece. So something the Romans, I guess, may have appreciated about him, though, was that because of this, Dionysus came to be considered the founder of the triumphal procession. Mm-hmm. So the glorious leader coming back, I have conquered.
I guess everyone's got a good idea somewhere.
I mean, something.
I guess that, you can't all be just bad ideas.
No.
Whatever. I guess they'll give him that one.
Yeah. However, when he returned home, apparently this is when he hit a wall. Because when he undertook efforts to introduce his religion into Greece, he was at first rejected, which makes sense, unfortunately, because of the structure of that society. That is because he was opposed by rulers who feared it, and on account of the disorders and madness it brought with it. This new god was dangerous and a threat to their power. He threatened to upend all social order by lifting those who were normally oppressed, liberating them of their societal chains. Everyone was allowed to worship him and loved by him as long as they accepted him, no matter their background. Men, women, foreigners, slaves, the downtrodden, kings, all of them were equals before Dionysus. And that is a scary prospect to those in power.
Mm-hmm. And also, kind of going back to your Jesus thing a little bit. Okay, we're just saying, I'm not saying that Dionysus is Jesus, but you've never seen them in the same room, just like you haven't seen me in the same room with them either.
Oh, we're going to have...
Oh, no, that's blasphemy. I think I'm not Jesus, guys. I'm not.
Technically, Inanna was the first Jesus, let's be real.
So...
Just saying.
Pretty much, he'd be just as down with hanging out with the hookers and slaves as he would be those same kings, which again departs radically from what all the other gods would have done. All the other gods kind of have their niche people, right? Mm-hmm. Artemis has her virgin youths. Zeus has his powerful kings. Mm-hmm. Apollo, same kind of thing. Kings, princes, right? They tend to be higher end, right? Hephaestus, specifically the common man and the workers. Kings aren't usually... they recognize Hephaestus as a necessity, but they're not I identify with Hephaestus, right? Yeah,
they're not seeing themselves in Hephaestus. They're like, oh, I can use this.
Yeah. And you would think Hades would be the great unifier, but no one wants to think about dying. So they were no. So no one really wanted to associate with him.
I do. Hades, this way. But,
But, for the most part, everyone had their niche, right? And Demeter, more matrony. Mm-hmm. And I would say that it's women in general tend to really identify with Demeter, right? Because, whether you're a noble woman or a, peasant farmer lady.
Mhm.
You could both find like aspects of her to really
Oh my gosh,
celebrate.
yes.
You know what I'm saying? Hera, again, more
Mhm.
like royal women, things like that.
Yeah.
But Dionysus, he didn't have that constraint. It's
He didn't
just
give no fucks.
if you're a king or an emperor, cool. Are you a slave? Cool. Again, parties are the great unifier, people. So they usually didn't just associate themselves with that kind of riffraff. Like, again, like I said, Zeus with kings, Hera dealt with those noble blood, and same even with Venus, like really just kind of,
Mm-hmm.
Venus is probably the closest one for I would say Venus and Hermes. Because, I think a lot of people can accept, like, you've got Aeneas, right? The
Mhm.
mythological founder of Rome, being and Julius Caesar associating themselves with Venus, right? But at the same time, like, hookers and women in general could really identify with, and anyone who wants to be fertile could identify themselves with Aphrodite. She's got her own complicated history. But I'm just saying, those are, and Athena, of course, being pretty limited to heroes and men. She doesn't really advocate for women.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for the most part, though, other than maybe the exception of Aphrodite and maybe Hermes a little bit.
Well, because Hermes, like, I will state, he kind of falls into that androgynous zone, in my opinion.
And he's more of a trickster god.
Yeah.
And, like, I don't think any kings are necessarily identifying with Hermes, but...
Well, because they're not going to be messengers. But, like, what king is going to be a messenger?
No, but a lot of princes and stuff do, because he's youthful and energetic and smart. You know, so, like, you could see heroes identifying and, like, noble men in general identifying with them. And at the same time, he, like you said, he's a messenger and a shepherd. So, like, again, those people all identify with him as well.
Yeah.
But even those cannot hold a candle to Dionysus, because the great unifier is
a good party.
And there's appeal to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll get to that shortly, because this all comes later. Some of these myths about who supports who. But I can tell you right now, for the most part, he was not always supporting just kings and queens.
No.
So.
All right. So in one myth adapted in Euripides' play, The Bacchae, Dionysus returns to his birthplace, Thebes.
Which totally contradicts that he was a foreign god if he was born in Thebes, which was part of main language. Just saying. Anyway, moving on. Which is ruled by his cousin, Pentheus. Pentheus, as well as his mother, Agave. Mm-hmm.
And his agave. Like, all I can think is, like, the cactus syrup.
Yes, that's where it comes from.
Really?
Yeah. What does agave get turned into?
Tequila.
Yes, and guess right. You're welcome.
No, like,
you're welcome.
The thing is, like, I'm from Texas. Agave is seen as more like a southern Mexico kind of thing.
So, like, if we're thinking tequila's associated with what? Alcohol, which is associated with what? Dionysus. And so
I love it.
Agave, his aunt, is the goddess of tequila.
I love it. And his aunts, Ino and Autonoe, disbelieved Dionysus's divine birth. Blame them. It's a lot for someone to take in. So, we can't really blame them for that.
Like, I mean, think about that. Like, I think, to be fair, could you imagine?
Like I came from my dad's nutsack.
Not even that. Imagine Semele, right? You got this, like, lady who's just going around, like, guess who I slept with? King of the gods, Zeus. Okay.
I'm sorry, that's not something to brag about.
So therefore my child's a god, guys.
Oh my god.
Right. I mean, like, let's be real. If this was, like, a realistic situation, their response to this, kind of realistic, especially when that baby ends up kind of, like, dropping off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
Like, so much for being a god, right?
Like,
I mean,
prove it.
But unfortunately, reality has no place in myths.
No, it really doesn't. So let's also remember that for the most of the Greek myth, the union between a mortal and a god never resulted in a full-blooded god other than demigods, right?
Yep.
Look like Hercules or Perseus or Theseus or any of these people. Out of that list, only Hercules became divine, but that was only at the end of his life. So it would seem rather strange that even if they believed him to be the product of Zeus, that he would be divine himself.
Right.
But unfortunately for them, it turned out to be true, so I'm sure that slandering his mom and denying his birthright will have no negative consequences. So with that being said, despite the warnings of the blind prophet Tiresias.
Also gender fluid, because he was turned into a lady for a while.
Oh, that would be so much fun. They deny his worship and denounce him for inspiring the women of Thebes to madness, which honestly, the madness, all it reminds me of is the 1950s diagnosis of hysteria.
Yeah, a little bit.
And it's just like, in the 1950s, they came out with a medical device that was pretty much a vibrator.
Well, that's, to be fair, I'm going to blow your mind further. It wasn't the 1950s. That went all the way back to the Victorians, babe.
True.
So not just the hysteria thing, the fact that a good lay, and that like giving them a dildo. I'm not. They were coming up with medical devices then. Granted, they were very unwieldy then. They were they looked like a messed up horse, which is kind of fitting for Greek mythology if we're thinking about some of this. But I digress. Again, like the cure to hysteria was them getting laid, I guess. I
mean, like, historically, men have not been a good fuck.
Well,
like,
spoiler alert, guys. None of them are getting laid.
None of them. That's all good.
So, Dionysus used his divine powers to drive Pentheus insane. Then he invites him, but it's like a subtle insane. It's not like, so like if you're reading the story, it's not just like him going, "Wah, wah, wah," like nothing like that. It's just like little like little bits. Like it's like he believes little lies. And like by the end, you're like, wow, he's really taking some liberties here.
Yeah.
It's very subtle. If you guys get the chance, you should read or like go see, because it's one of the most famous plays from this period, right? Go look at it. Euripides is amazing. He's one of the few Greek writers that doesn't treat women poorly. In fact, he makes them the main characters a lot of the time. But yeah, take a look at that. He holds men accountable. It's good times. So anyway, so Dionysus then invites him, because he doesn't know he's Dionysus yet, to spy on the rituals of the Maenads in the woods of Mount Catharion. Pentheus, hoping to witness a sexual orgy, hides himself in a tree. But before he can do that, Dionysus, who again is in disguise, tells him that he has to do a couple things. One of those things includes dressing in drag. Yeah, that's right, folks. Drag's been a thing. And disguising himself as a woman. And of course, Pentheus states that he finds this horrifying and liberating at the same time. So I'm just thinking of that scene from Rocky Horror.
Oh my God, yes.
You know what I'm talking about, right? Where
do.
Brad wakes up, he's in those fishnets, and he goes, "Help me, mommy! I feel sexy." And I'm like, that's all I'm imagining here.
So we need a Rocky Horror Night. Got you,
yeah,
yes.
And they need to redo this play, inspired by Rocky Horror, and they need to do this whole scene.
Oh my God, that would be amazing.
So if you're imagining Greek Pentheus with his toga, and then all of a sudden he lifts a leg and he's wearing fishnets with a high heel, you're in the right place.
Love it so much.
It's the same energy.
It really is.
And I love Dionysus for this. However, of course, this ends poorly. Because this is Greek myth, baby. The Maenads spot him and are maddened by Dionysus. Everyone's crazy here. Different kind of madness, though.
Bad madness.
Bad madness. His is like the kind of madness where it's like, what do you call it? Like you're just disconnected from reality, right? Dissociating. Yeah. Like you're really not delusional. That's one thing. He's like delusional. Whereas theirs is like the kind of madness where you're just in a rage and just not thinking clearly.
Mob mentality.
Yeah. Yeah. So they take him to be a mountain-dwelling lion and attack him with their bare hands. Pentheus's aunts and his own mother Agave are among them. That's right. These women who talk smack about their sister and their nephew are now ripping their other nephew/son apart with their bare hands, ripping him limb from limb. Agave, Pentheus's own mother, mounts his head on a pike, and takes the trophy to her father, Cadmus. Like, this is some dark stuff, right?
Yeah.
So Dionysus, yes, he's the fun party god. This is also Dionysus.
Mm-hmm.
Don't piss him off.
No.
So while Dionysus can be totally a fun guy, and a lot of this, let's be real, the party god thing, that's Rome. They were trying to, like, soften him up a bit.
Yeah.
You know? Like, it's like, he's fun. Don't take him seriously. Like, seriously, guys, don't fuck with this guy.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to get there, and usually he gives you a lot of chances in the myths. Like, to, like, be like, you sure you want this? But eventually you're going to run out of chances. And you're going to get torn limb from limb, possibly by your own family members.
I mean,
yeah.
So just listen to this quote from the play. But she was foaming at the mouth. Her eyes rolled all around. Her mind was mindless now. Held by the god, she paid the man no heed. She grabbed his left arm just below the elbow. Wedging her foot against the victim's ribs, she ripped his shoulder off. Not by mere force, the god made easy everything they touch. On his right arm worked Ino, ripping flesh. Autonoe and the mob of Maenads gripped him, screaming as one while he had breath. He cried. But they were whooping victory calls. One took an arm, a foot another, boot and all. They stripped his torso bare, staining their nails with blood, then tossed balls of flesh around. Pentheus's body lay in fragments now on their hard rocks, and mingled with the leaves buried in the woodland, hard to find. His mother stumbled across his head. Poor head. She grabbed it and fixed it on her thyrsus, like a lion's to wave in joyful triumph at her hunt.
You gotta give Euripides credit. He really knows how to paint a vivid picture.
That's a fucked up picture.
That's great. The madness passes. Dionysus arrives in his true divine form and banishes Agave and her sisters and transformed Cadmus and his wife Harmonia into serpents. Only, which is kind of wild. So fun fact, Harmonia is like depending on like what you're looking at, she's a goddess nonetheless. Either she's either the product of Zeus and Hera or Ares and Aphrodite. Either way.
So a goddess either way.
Of like Olympian status. And yet this half god, well, half mortal, like lineage, could just easily transform one of these people, like goddesses, into a serpent. That's wild. Just keep that in mind. Whew. Also, poor Cadmus. I feel like he didn't do really anything wrong here.
He
really was just
didn't.
like, here, man.
He just existed at wrong place, wrong time.
He's like one of the first ones to go with Tiresias to go like accept Dionysus. So I'm like, why did you punish him? I don't know. So only Tiresias though is spared. So just something to consider here. I don't think there's too many stories where we can see a god punishing their parents quite like this. I know the origin myths of Zeus and stuff, but Dionysus is pretty unique because of all of his family ancestry. The one, like I said, the one side is mortal, and he's it's pretty wild.
It is.
Usually these gods take out their wrath on like people who don't deserve it, but he pinpointed the people, and then whole people other than Cadmus. I don't know what Cadmus did, but whatever. For the most part, but he didn't like make the town suffer.
Yeah.
So earlier on in this play too, one of the first stops he made is the grave of his mother, which is apparently still on fire from when she initially saw Zeus. So you have to think he grew up like a normal pace. We'll say he's in his 20s, right? I don't know. I feel like you can't be like a teenager and conquering India. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say 20s, probably early 30s. Like he's.
Well, if we've got like a cap when they're gods and they just stay forever beautiful in their prime, then we'll say he's in his 20s at this point.
Yeah, true.
But like, yeah, so like you have to think like 20-something years has passed, and like his mom's still burning. That's a really harrowing like scene. I just think that's such a cool scene.
It is, but at the same time, like, it kind of highlights just how powerful the true form of Zeus was.
And you know what's really cool?
What's
and I'm just kind of realizing this. You don't see this too often with even the demigods later, like the Herculeses and stuff.
Yeah.
They're all worried about, like, their divine side, right? Like, proving, like, you know, like, you don't really hear about them talking about their mom. Right?
No, and you don't, because they don't give any credit to it.
Or even Achilles, right? Like, we all know his, like, you know, divine mom, right? The one who dipped him and everything else. That's right. Does anyone know his dad's name off the top of their head?
Hell no.
I know, we know his name. It's just like, that's not the one we remember. He's not in the Iliad. She is. So it's always the divine parent we give a crap about, right? But here, we know Dionysus' mom. It's Semele. And the first person he visits on his trip home, it's not a temple to Zeus. It's his mom. His mortal mom. Yep. And he's mad for his mom, the mortal. And I just think that's so cool. It's correct. You don't see that very often, you know? Like, it's so often, like, if the mom's done dirty, they don't even, like, avenge them. It's just, I don't know, but at the same time, oh, well, I don't think you're really related to Zeus. And then they get all mad. And kind of happened here, but more than that. It was like, you humiliated my mom. My mom is still burning. And you don't take that as proof?
I know.
And it's, I can't help but notice that he stopped at his mom's grave first. And then, when he wasn't accepted,
that's when he lost his shit.
It's like, And I think that's awesome. So that's going to conclude this time around. Next time, we will dive a little further into the myths of Dionysus. This has been just more of a coverage of his origins, the symbols, and things like that. So but he has plenty of other people to meet.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Yeah, and he's got still a lot more traveling to do. So, you know, I can't wait to talk about that. And we haven't even talked about Ariadne yet.
Soon.
So, my girl, his queen. So, but yeah, so this time that's where we're going to leave it. Of course, you know, we've got a Patreon set up. We have a Facebook page and all the social medias that we will provide for you within the link tree. If you'd like to leave us a review, we are just starting out. So in order to navigate the dark magic that is the algorithm.
Ah, yes, algorithms.
The algorithms. So that we can reach more people like you, hopefully, who listen and enjoyed this and our special brand of history, you know. That's the best way we can reach out to these people, and that way we can expand and keep this going. So any kind of review would be beneficial. I would appreciate positivity. 5 stars, appreciated. Thank you. If it's a 0 star, please email us.
Email us your opinions. What do we need to do better? Like,
correct. Please don't
let us know.
Please don't, but don't ruin it for everyone else. Thank you. But but no, for real. And speaking of email, you know, we would love to hear from you guys. Give us critique and things like that on this podcast. Tell us what you think. Give us suggestions or ideas for the future, or even just, you know, fun pet pictures. You know, doesn't have to always be related to this. We'd love to hear from you guys. So, but until then, you know, in about a week's time, roughly, we shall have a new episode for you, continuing the story of Dionysus. So, until then, goodbye, and hope you have a great
rest of your evening. Bye, guys.